The dust kicked up around her boots as Victoria Vance stumbled backward on the train platform, her leather traveling case flying from her grip as the wooden boards beneath her feet gave way to nothing but air and a 12-foot drop to the rocky ground below. One moment, she was stepping off the afternoon train into Wilson, New Mexico territory, and the next she was falling, her arms windmilling uselessly as gravity pulled her down. Time seemed to stretch impossibly thin, and in that suspended heartbeat, she saw her entire miserable journey flash before her eyes: the family who had disowned her for refusing an arranged marriage, the fiancé who had publicly humiliated her when she caught him with another woman, the so-called friends who had turned their backs when scandal touched her name. Everyone had let her go, released her to whatever fate awaited. Then a strong hand clamped around her wrist, and her body jerked to a halt mid-fall. She looked up, gasping, into the most striking pair of green eyes she had ever seen. The man was on his stomach at the edge of the platform, his other hand braced against a support beam, his entire body tensed with the effort of holding her weight. Dust covered his dark hair, and a scar ran along his jawline, but his grip was absolutely steady. "I've got you," he said, his voice calm despite the strain she could see in his neck muscles. "On three, I am going to pull you up. You are going to help by walking your feet up the side. Understand?" Victoria nodded, unable to form words, her heart hammered against her ribs. 1, 2, 3. He pulled with surprising strength, and Victoria scrambled with her feet against the platform's edge, her skirts tangling around her legs. In seconds, she was back on solid ground, sprawled on the wooden planks beside her rescuer. She lay there panting, staring up at the brilliant blue October sky. "Are you hurt?" The man sat up, examining her with those remarkable eyes. Up close, she could see he was probably around 25, with sun-bronzed skin and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for a living. He wore typical cowboy attire, worn denim pants, a dusty shirt, and a leather vest. A cattleman's hat lay a few feet away where it had apparently fallen during the rescue. "I do not think so," Victoria managed, checking her arms and legs. Her dress was torn at the hem and covered in dust, but everything seemed to be intact. "That platform just gave way. Been meaning to fix that section for weeks," came a gruff voice. The station master hurried over, wringing his hands. "Miss, I am terribly sorry. Are you all right? Mr. Sullivan saved you a nasty fall there, maybe worse." "Sullivan?" Victoria looked at her rescuer again. "Kane Sullivan." He stood and offered her his hand again, this time to help her to her feet rather than save her life. She took it, noting the calluses and strength. "I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles outside town. Victoria Vance." She brushed dust from her skirts, trying to regain some dignity. Her hands were shaking. "I suppose I owe you my life, Mr. Sullivan. Just Kane is fine." He retrieved her fallen traveling case and his hat. "Are you visiting Wilson, Miss Vance, or staying?" "Staying, I hope." Victoria took her case from him, their fingers brushing briefly. "I am supposed to be meeting Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore. I answered her advertisement for a teaching position." Kane's expression brightened. "Eleanor is my aunt. She has been talking about you coming for weeks now. The schoolhouse has been without a proper teacher since old Miss Ferguson retired last spring." He glanced at the station master. "Bill, I am taking Miss Vance to Eleanor's house, and fix that platform before someone actually gets killed." The station master nodded vigorously, already examining the broken boards. "You do not have to escort me," Victoria protested, though she was grateful for the offer. Her legs still felt unsteady. "I am sure you have work to attend to. Nothing that cannot wait an hour." Kane gestured toward the main street. "Besides, Alina would tan my hide if she knew I let you wander around town alone after what just happened. Wilson is safe enough, but you have had a shock. Victoria could not argue with that. She fell into step beside Kane, acutely aware of how tall he was compared to her 5'4" frame. The afternoon sun beat down on them as they walked along the dusty Main Street. Wilson was smaller than she had expected, with perhaps 24 buildings lining the central road: a general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and various other establishments typical of a New Mexico Territory town in 1885. "How long have you lived here?" Victoria asked, trying to steady her voice. "All my life. My father started the ranch in 1860 before I was born. He passed 3 years ago, left everything to me." Kane nodded to several people as they walked, and Victoria noticed how everyone seemed to know him. "Alina is actually my mother's sister. She moved here from Boston after her husband died to help my mother raise me. Mother passed when I was 15 and Alina just stayed. I am sorry for your losses." Victoria meant it sincerely. She understood loss, though perhaps a different kind. "What brings you all the way out here from?" Kane paused, waiting. "Philadelphia." The word tasted bitter. "I needed a fresh start, somewhere far from home." Kane did not pry, and Victoria appreciated that. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, until he stopped in front of a neat wooden house painted white with green shutters. A small garden flourished in the front yard, an impressive feat in the dry climate. Before Kane could knock, the door flew open and a woman in her 50s rushed out. She was small and plump with silver-streaked dark hair and warm brown eyes. "Victoria, I saw you from the window. Welcome, dear, welcome." Alina Whitmore pulled Victoria into an embrace before stepping back. "Good heavens, child, you are covered in dust." "What happened?" "The platform at the station gave way," Kane explained. "She nearly took a bad fall." Alina's hand flew to her mouth. "That dreadful broken section, I told Bill a dozen times. Victoria, are you hurt? Come inside right now." "Kane, fetch her trunk from the station, would you?" "Already planning to, Aunt Alina." Kane touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Vance, I am glad you are all right. I am sure I will see you around town." "Thank you again, Kane." Victoria met his eyes and something passed between them, some unspoken acknowledgement of the moment they had shared. "Truly, I cannot thank you enough." He gave her a small smile that transformed his serious face. "Just glad I was there." Then he was striding back toward the station, his long legs covering the ground quickly. Alina ushered Victoria inside the cozy house. "That nephew of mine is a good man," she said, leading Victoria to a small but comfortable guest room. "Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but he has a good heart. His father was the same way. Now let me get you some water to wash up, and then we will have tea and talk about everything. The schoolhouse, your accommodations, the children you will be teaching." Over the next hour, Victoria learned that she would have about 20 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old, that the schoolhouse was a 10-minute walk from Alina's home, and that she would be earning $30 a month plus room and board. It was more than generous for a small town, and Victoria felt some of the tension she had been carrying begin to ease. "Now," Alina said, pouring more tea, "I do not mean to pry, but Kane mentioned you needed a fresh start. If you ever want to talk about what brought you here, I am a good listener. If not, that is fine too. Everyone has a right to their past." Victoria stirred sugar into her tea, considering. There was something warm and trustworthy about Alina Whitmore. "My family wanted me to marry a man 30 years my senior, a business associate of my father's. When I refused, they disowned me. My fiancé, the man I actually loved or thought I loved, he took their side, said I was being foolish and ungrateful." The words came easier than she expected. I caught him with another woman 2 weeks later. When I tried to break our engagement publicly, he spread rumors that I was unstable, difficult. My friends abandoned me. I had some money my grandmother left me, enough to start over. So here I am." Alina reached across the table and squeezed Victoria's hand. "Here you are indeed, and Wilson is lucky to have you. That life is behind you now, dear. Here, you can be whoever you want to be." That night, lying in the comfortable bed in Alina's guest room, Victoria replayed the day's events. She kept returning to that moment on the platform, the feeling of falling and then Kane's strong grip stopping her descent. The look in his eyes focused, determined, unwavering. "You caught me when everyone else let go," she thought, then shook her head. It was just a literal rescue, nothing metaphorical about it. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, it was Kane Sullivan's face she saw. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Alina walked Victoria to the schoolhouse after breakfast, introducing her to seemingly everyone they passed. The schoolhouse itself was a simple wooden structure with rows of benches, a large slate board at the front, and windows that let in plenty of light. Books lined shelves along one wall, and a pot-bellied stove sat in the corner for winter heating. "The children will start arriving around 8, Alina explained. "Most of them are good kids, though Tommy Henderson can be a handful. He is 11 and thinks he is too old for schooling. His mother insists he attend at least through the winter." Victoria spent the morning meeting her students and assessing their skill levels. They ranged from little 6-year-old Sarah Miller, who could barely write her name, to 14-year-old James Parker, who was reading at an advanced level and hungry for knowledge. Tommy Henderson indeed proved challenging, slumping at his desk in the back and making faces when he thought Victoria was not looking. By the afternoon, Victoria felt exhausted but satisfied. Teaching was what she loved, what she was good at. In Philadelphia, she had worked at a private girls' school until the scandal made her position untenable. Here, she had a chance to make a real difference. She was locking up the schoolhouse when she saw Kane riding by on a beautiful bay horse. He slowed when he spotted her. "Miss Vance." "How was your first day?" "Exhausting and wonderful." Victoria walked to the fence where he had stopped. "Your aunt was right, the children are eager to learn, mostly." "Tommy Henderson giving you trouble?" Kane's mouth quirked. "How did you know?" "He gave Miss Ferguson trouble too." "Good kid underneath, just stubborn." Kane paused. "I was wondering if you might like to see the ranch sometime. Alina mentioned you had never been on a working cattle ranch before." Victoria's heart beat a little faster. "I would like that very much. How about Sunday afternoon?" "I can pick you up after church services." "That sounds perfect." Kane smiled that transforming smile again. "Sunday it is, then." He touched his hat brim and rode on, leaving Victoria standing by the schoolhouse fence with a foolish grin on her face. The week passed in a blur of lessons and gradual adjustment to life in Wilson. Victoria found herself fitting in more easily than she had expected. The townspeople were friendly and accepting, asking few questions about her past. She ate dinners with Alina each evening, learning about the town's history and its inhabitants. Alina was a wealth of information, delivered with humor and genuine affection for her neighbors. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather. Victoria dressed carefully in her best day dress, a deep blue that brought out her eyes. She had dark blonde hair that she wore in a simple style, and she pinched her cheeks for color before heading downstairs. Alina was smiling knowingly over her coffee. "Kane is a good man to spend an afternoon with. Just be back before dark. People in small towns talk, you know, Mrs. Whitmore." Victoria felt herself blush. "Oh, call me Alina, dear, and I am not saying anything improper. I just noticed the way my nephew has been finding excuses to ride past the schoolhouse every afternoon this week." Had he? Victoria had noticed him once or twice, but assumed it was coincidence. Church services were held in a white clapboard building at the edge of town. Victoria sat with Alina, acutely aware of Kane sitting 2 rows behind them. She could feel his presence like a physical thing. The sermon washed over her, something about charity and community, delivered by a kind-faced minister named Reverend Thomas. After the service, Kane appeared at her elbow. Ready to see the ranch, his wagon was waiting outside, a sturdy vehicle pulled by 2 horses. He helped Victoria up to the bench seat, his hands firm at her waist. Alina waved them off with barely concealed delight. The ride to the ranch took about 20 minutes along a well-maintained road. Kane pointed out landmarks: a creek that ran through his property, the boundaries between his land and neighboring spreads, a rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant. "How much land do you have?" Victoria asked. "About 2,000 acres. We run about 500 head of cattle, mostly Herefords. I have 3 full-time ranch hands and hire extra help during roundup and branding season." Kane handled the reins with easy confidence. "It is not the biggest operation in New Mexico territory, but it is mine, and it is profitable." The ranch house came into view, a sprawling single-story structure built of adobe and wood. It was larger than Victoria expected, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property: a barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and storage sheds. "My father built the main house," Kane said, helping Victoria down from the wagon. "I added on to it 2 years ago. Seemed too small, even though it is just me living here." They spent the afternoon exploring the ranch. Kane introduced her to his ranch hands Tom, Miguel, and young Jesse, who could not have been more than 19. He showed her the cattle grazing in distant pastures, explained the workings of the operation, let her feed carrots to his horses. Victoria found herself fascinated not just by the ranch but by Kane himself. He was patient in his explanations, clearly passionate about his work, and surprisingly funny once he relaxed. They sat on the porch as the sun began its descent, drinking cool water and watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. "Why did you really invite me here?" Victoria asked suddenly, surprised by her own boldness. Kane was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I pulled you up on that platform, and I wanted to spend time with you, get to know you." He met her eyes. "If that is too forward, I apologize." "It is not too forward." Victoria's voice was soft. "I have been thinking about you too." "You have had a lot of people let you down," Kane said carefully. "Alina told me a little about why you came here. Not details, just that you needed a fresh start. I want you to know I do not make promises lightly, but when I do, I keep them. If we are going to be friends, or maybe something more, I will not let you down." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "You caught me when everyone else let go." Kane reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. "And I would do it again, every single time." They sat like that as the sun set, hands intertwined, something new and fragile building between them. The courtship that followed was slow and sweet. Kane was nothing if not respectful, always mindful of Victoria's reputation. He called on her at Alina's house twice a week, sitting in the parlor and talking for hours about everything and nothing. They discussed books, both loved adventure novels and dreams for the future. Kane wanted to expand his ranch, maybe diversify into horse breeding. Victoria wanted to establish a lending library in Wilson, make education accessible to everyone. October faded into November. Victoria threw herself into teaching, watching her students progress and grow. Even Tommy Henderson began to come around. especially after Kane took the time to talk to him one afternoon about the importance of education in running a business. Coming from someone Tommy respected, the message landed better. The town of Wilson prepared for Thanksgiving. It was to be a community celebration, with everyone contributing dishes and gathering at the church hall. Victoria found herself looking forward to being part of a community in a way she had never experienced in Philadelphia's rigid social hierarchies. The night before Thanksgiving, Kane took Victoria for a walk along the creek that ran through town. The November air was crisp, but not yet bitter, and the stars overhead were breathtaking in their multitude. "I have something I want to tell you," Kane said as they walked. His hand held hers, a familiar gesture now. "About the scar on my jaw," Victoria waited. She had wondered but never asked. 4 years ago, there was a dispute over water rights between my ranch and a neighboring spread. The other rancher man named Davis, he got mean about it. One night he and some of his men came to my place, tried to intimidate me into giving up my water access. There was a fight. Davis had a knife. Kane touched the scar unconsciously. He got one good slice in before my ranch hands came running. Davis and his men took off. The territorial marshal got involved, sorted everything out legally. Davis sold his ranch and moved away, but the scar stayed. "That must have been terrifying," Victoria said. "It was, but it taught me something important. You stand up for what is yours, for what is right, even when it is hard or scary, and you do not back down just because someone tries to intimidate you." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You did that. When your family and that man tried to force you into a life you did not want, you said no. You walked away from everything familiar to start over. That takes real courage." "It felt more like running away," Victoria admitted. "No. Running away is staying in a situation that is killing your spirit because you are too afraid to change it. What you did, that was running toward something better, toward the life you deserved." Kane cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you, Victoria?" Her answer was to rise on her toes and meet him halfway. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria was breathless and smiling. "I think I am falling in love with you, Kane Sullivan," she whispered. "I know I am falling in love with you, Victoria Vance," he replied. Thanksgiving Day was chaos and joy. The church hall was packed with what seemed like the entire population of Wilson and the surrounding ranches. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted turkeys, hams, potatoes, vegetables, pies, and cakes. Children ran around playing while adults visited and laughed. Victoria helped a leaner set out their contributions, a pumpkin pie and a green bean casserole. Kane stayed close, introducing her to people she had not yet met, his hand resting lightly on her lower back in a proprietary gesture that made her heart flutter. "That is your girl, then?" asked an older rancher named Pete Morrison. "Good choice, Kane. She is pretty and has brains. Eleanor says the school has never run better." "She is remarkable," Kane agreed, smiling down at Victoria, who blushed at the praise. After the meal, there was dancing. Someone produced a fiddle, another a guitar, and music filled the hall. Kane proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, leading Victoria through reels and waltzes with confident ease. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Victoria asked, laughing as he spun her. "My mother insisted. Said a man should know how to dance properly, even if he spent his days with cattle and horses." Kane pulled her close for a waltz. "I am glad now that she did." As the evening wound down and people began to head home, Kane walked Victoria and Eleanor back to the house. At the door, he kissed Victoria's hand formally, though his eyes held promises of more private kisses to come. "Come to the ranch tomorrow," he asked quietly. "I want to show you something." "What?" "It is a surprise." Victoria arrived at the ranch the next afternoon to find Kane waiting with 2 horses saddled. "I am not a very experienced rider," Victoria warned. "That mare is gentle as a lamb. I promise you will be safe." Kane helped her mount, adjusting her stirrups and making sure she felt secure. Then he swung onto his own horse with practiced ease. They rode for about half an hour, following a trail that wound up into the hills behind the ranch. The November landscape was beautiful in its starkness: brown grasses, dark green junipers, red rock formations. Kane led them to a flat overlook that provided a stunning view of the valley below. "I come here when I need to think," Kane said, dismounting and helping Victoria down. "My father showed me this place when I was 10. He said sometimes a man needs to get above his problems to see them clearly." They sat on a flat rock, their horses grazing peacefully nearby. The valley spread below them like a patchwork quilt: ranches and farms, the town of Wilson a cluster of buildings in the distance, roads threading between properties. "It is beautiful," Victoria breathed. "I wanted to bring you here because I wanted you to see what I see," Kane said. "This valley, this town, this is home. It is where I belong. But lately, when I look at all this, when I think about the future, you are part of it. You are in every plan I make, every dream I have." He took her hand. "I know we have only known each other 6 weeks. I know some people would say that is too fast. But Victoria, I know what I feel. I love you. And I think I started loving you the moment I caught you on that platform." Victoria felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you too. I have tried to be cautious, to guard my heart after everything that happened in Philadelphia. But you make me feel safe in a way I have never felt before. Like I can be completely myself, and that is not just acceptable but wonderful." Kane wiped her tears gently with his thumb. "I want to court you properly, do this right. But I also want you to know my intentions. When you are ready, when enough time has passed that you feel comfortable, I want to marry you, Victoria. I want to build a life with you, fill that big house with children and laughter and love. I want to grow old with you." "Yes," Victoria said simply. "To all of it, yes." They kissed on that hilltop as the sun set over the valley, sealing their promise to each other. Winter in New Mexico territory was milder than Philadelphia winters, but it still brought cold nights and occasional snow. Victoria continued teaching, watching with satisfaction as her students progressed. She and Kane saw each other as often as propriety and work allowed. Eleanor served as a willing chaperone and seemed delighted by their obvious love for each other. In mid-December, Kane officially proposed, presenting Victoria with a delicate gold ring that had belonged to his mother. She accepted with joy, and they set a wedding date for early April, giving them time to plan and allowing enough of a courtship period to satisfy convention. The engagement was announced in church the following Sunday, and the whole town seemed to celebrate with them. Victoria received congratulations and advice from nearly every woman in Wilson. Kane endured good-natured ribbing from his ranch hands and fellow ranchers. Christmas arrived with a rare snowfall that blanketed Wilson in white. Kane took Victoria on a sleigh ride through the transformed landscape, bundled in blankets and laughing like children. They exchanged gifts. Victoria gave Kane a hand-tooled leather journal for tracking ranch business, and he gave her a beautiful shawl he had ordered from Santa Fe, along with a complete set of books she had mentioned wanting for the school library. "These must have cost a fortune," Victoria protested, running her hands over the leather-bound volumes. "You are worth it. Your students are worth it. Education matters." Kane kissed her forehead. "Besides, I am going to be marrying a teacher. I need to support her work." The new year of 1886 arrived with hope and promise. Victoria's students returned from their Christmas break energized and ready to learn. Kane worked on preparing the ranch house for Victoria's arrival, making small improvements and ensuring everything was perfect. They spent hours planning their wedding and their future, talking late into the evening in Alina's parlor. In late February, Victoria's past came calling in the form of a letter. She found it waiting when she returned from school, her name and Alina's address written in handwriting she recognized immediately. Her former fiancé, Gerald Winchester. Victoria's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was long and full of apologies and excuses. Gerald claimed he had made a terrible mistake, that he realized now he truly loved her, that the other woman had meant nothing. He had heard through mutual acquaintances about her engagement to a rancher in New Mexico territory. He begged her to reconsider, to come back to Philadelphia, promised that things would be different. "Are you all right?" Alina found Victoria sitting in the parlor, the letter crumpled in her lap. "Dear, you are white as a sheet. It is from Gerald. He wants me to come back." Victoria looked up, her eyes filled with confusion and old pain. "He says he loves me, that he made a mistake." Alina sat beside her and took the letter, reading quickly. Her expression grew frosty. "This man humiliated you, spread lies about you, and now he expects you to come running back. Victoria, surely you are not considering it." "No, no, of course not." Victoria was surprised to realize she meant it completely. "I do not love him. I am not even sure I ever really did. I loved the idea of him, of the life we were supposed to have. But Gerald never really saw me, never knew me the way Kane does." She took the letter back and walked to the fireplace, tossing it into the flames. "That life is over. This is where I belong now." But the letter had stirred up old insecurities, old wounds. That evening, when Kane came to call, Victoria was quieter than usual, more withdrawn. "What is wrong?" Kane asked, taking her hands. "And do not say nothing. I know you too well now." Victoria told him about the letter, about Gerald's plea for her to return. Kane's jaw tightened as he listened, but he waited until she finished before speaking. "Are you having second thoughts about us?" His voice was carefully controlled, but Victoria could hear the fear underneath. "No, absolutely not." Victoria squeezed his hands. "I love you, Kane. I want to marry you." But the letter brought back all these feelings of not being enough, of being the one who was left behind and abandoned. What if I am making another mistake? What if I am not cut out for this life, for being a rancher's wife? Kane pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You are not making a mistake, and you are more than enough, Victoria. That man did not deserve you. Your family did not deserve you. But I promise you, I will spend every day of our lives together making sure you know how extraordinary you are." He pulled back to look at her. "And as for being a rancher's wife, you do not have to be anything other than yourself. I fell in love with Victoria Vance, the teacher from Philadelphia. That is who I want to marry." Victoria felt the last of her doubts dissolve. "I needed to hear that. Thank you." "Always." Kane kissed her softly. "We are going to have a wonderful life together, I promise you that." March brought warmer weather and the beginning of spring roundup. Kane was busy from dawn to dusk, and Victoria saw less of him, though he made sure to visit at least twice a week, dusty and exhausted but always happy to see her. Victoria used the time to work with Alina on wedding preparations. The ceremony would be held in the church, followed by a reception at the ranch. Nearly the entire town was invited. Victoria's wedding dress was a simple but elegant white gown that Alina helped her sew. They ordered special fabric from Santa Fe, a beautiful silk that caught the light. Victoria felt like a princess trying it on for the final fitting. "You look beautiful," Alina said, tears in her eyes. "Kane is going to be speechless when he sees you." "I still cannot quite believe this is happening," Victoria admitted. That I am getting married, starting this new life. Believe it, dear. You and Kane are perfect for each other. I have never seen him as happy as he has been these past months. Alina adjusted the dress's hem. He was so serious after his father died, took on so much responsibility so young. You brought joy back into his life. The week before the wedding, Kane took Victoria back to the overlook where he had first told her he loved her. Spring had transformed the landscape. Wildflowers dotted the hillsides in splashes of yellow and purple, and new grass was greening up the valley below. "In a few days, you will be my wife," Kane said, pulling Victoria close as they looked out over the view. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "If it is, I am dreaming it too," Victoria replied, leaning back against his chest. His arms wrapped around her waist, solid and warm. "I have been thinking about children," Kane said. "How many you might want?" Victoria smiled. "I would like several. I always wanted a big family, though my parents only had me. What about you?" "Same. Growing up alone was lonely sometimes. I want our house to be full of noise and chaos and love." He kissed her temple. "Boys, girls, does not matter to me, as long as they are healthy and happy and ours." "Ours," Victoria repeated softly, loving the sound of it. The morning of April 7th, 1886, dawned clear and perfect. Victoria woke at Alina's house. Her wedding day finally arrived. She could hardly eat breakfast, nerves and excitement warring in her stomach. Alina fussed over her, making sure every detail was perfect. At 2 o'clock, Victoria stood in the small room at the back of the church, listening to the gathering crowd. Her hands shook slightly as she held her bouquet of wildflowers. Alina appeared in the doorway. "Ready, dear, it is time." The church was packed. Victoria processed down the aisle on Alina's arm, since she had no family to give her away. But she did not need them. The whole town had become her family over the past 6 months. She saw faces she knew and loved: her students, the shopkeepers, the ranchers and their wives, everyone who had welcomed her and accepted her. And at the front of the church stood Kane, wearing a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes locked on her. His expression as she approached was one of absolute wonder and love. Victoria felt tears threaten, but she blinked them back, smiling instead. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony with warmth and joy. Victoria and Kane spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and honor each other through all the years to come. When Kane slipped his mother's ring onto Victoria's finger, his hand was steady, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was gentle and full of promise. The reception at the ranch was everything Victoria could have hoped for. Tables laden with food were set up outside, taking advantage of the perfect spring weather. There was music and dancing and laughter. Toasts were made to the new couple's happiness. Victoria danced with Kane, with elderly Pete Morrison, with young Jesse from the ranch, with seemingly every man in attendance. Kane was claimed by all the women, but his eyes kept returning to Victoria, tracking her around the gathering. As evening approached, guests began to leave. Kane and Victoria stood on the porch of their home, waving goodbye and accepting final congratulations. When the last wagon had rolled away, Kane swept Victoria up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise and laughter. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Kane said, shouldering open the door. "It is tradition." He carried her inside their home, setting her down gently in the front room. Suddenly shy, they stood looking at each other in the lamplight. "We are married," Victoria said, stating the obvious. "We are." Kane stepped closer, taking her hands. "I love you, Victoria Sullivan." She loved the sound of her new name. "I love you too." The shyness faded as Kane kissed her. and Victoria kissed him back, both of them letting the passion they had carefully banked during their courtship finally kindle into flame. Victoria settled into life as a rancher's wife with surprising ease. She continued teaching through the end of the school term in late May, riding into town 3 days a week. The other days she spent at the ranch, learning about the operation and finding her place in this new life. She discovered she enjoyed working with the horses, and Kane taught her to ride properly. She helped with the accounts, her neat handwriting and head for figures making short work of the business paperwork. She learned to cook using the wood stove, with guidance from Miguel's wife, Carmen, who lived on a neighboring property. The ranch hands had been wary at first of having a woman around, but Victoria's genuine interest in the work and her willingness to learn won them over. She brought fresh baked goods to the bunkhouse once a week, helped patch up Jesse when he got thrown from a horse, and offered to teach reading to Miguel, who had never learned. Summer arrived hot and bright. Victoria's teaching term ended, and she threw herself into ranch life full-time. Kane was busier than ever with summer work, but they always made time for each other, riding out in the early mornings to check on distant pastures, sitting together on the porch in the evenings as the heat faded. In late July, Victoria began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly cycle was late and she felt queasy in the mornings. Carmen, who had 5 children of her own, took one look at Victoria and knew. "You are carrying, yes," Carmen said with a knowing smile. "The baby, you will tell Kane." Victoria felt a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I want to be sure first, and I want to tell him in the right way." She waited another 2 weeks until she was certain. Then she planned carefully. She made Kane's favorite dinner pot roast with potatoes and carrots, followed by apple pie. After they ate, she took his hand and led him out to the porch. "I have something to tell you," Victoria said, suddenly nervous. Kane looked concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is very, very right." Victoria placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "I am pregnant, Kane. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Kane just stared at her. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Victoria had ever seen. He whooped with joy, picking her up and spinning her around before remembering to be gentle and setting her down carefully. "We are having a baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "When?" "I think sometime in February, if my calculations are correct." Kane pulled her close, his hand protective on her stomach. "I am going to be a father. You are going to be a mother. We are going to be parents." He kissed her tenderly. "I love you so much, Victoria. Thank you for this gift." Tears streamed down Victoria's cheeks. "Happy tears," she assured him. "I am just so happy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Victoria continued her ranch activities with modifications, letting Kane and the hands handle the heavier work. She spent time preparing the small bedroom next to theirs as a nursery, sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Kane was endlessly solicitous, worrying over her constantly, which Victoria found both sweet and occasionally irritating. "I am pregnant, not ill," she reminded him when he insisted she could not ride into town alone. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman," Kane replied stubbornly. "Not my child." In September, Victoria received a letter from a leaner who was visiting family in Boston. The letter mentioned, almost casually, that news had reached her of Victoria's former fiancé, Gerald. Apparently, he had married hastily and was already regretting it, his new wife spending his money as fast as he could make it. Victoria read the letter to Kane that evening. He shook his head. "That man is a fool. He had you and threw it away. I hope he is miserable." "I do not," Victoria said, surprising herself with the realization. "I hope he finds happiness eventually. Because if he had not been such a fool, if things had not fallen apart in Philadelphia the way they did, I never would have come to Wilson. I never would have met you. Everything that seemed like disaster at the time led me exactly where I needed to be. Kane kissed her softly. Falling off that platform was the luckiest thing that ever happened to both of us. You caught me when everyone else let go, Victoria said, as she had said that first day. And you have been catching me ever since. Winter arrived, bringing cold but generally clear weather. Victoria was very pregnant now, her belly round and prominent. She felt ungainly and uncomfortable, but Kane insisted she was beautiful, his eyes following her wherever she went. The baby was active, kicking and rolling. Kane loved placing his hand on Victoria's stomach and feeling their child move. "Do you hope for a boy or a girl?" Victoria asked one evening as they prepared for bed. Kane considered. "Honestly, I do not care. A boy would be nice, someone to take over the ranch someday. But a girl would be wonderful too, a little version of you." He helped Victoria into bed, propping pillows behind her back. "As long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely, that is all that matters." In mid-February, Victoria's labor began in the early hours of the morning. Kane rode to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Adams, then sent Jessie to bring Carmen and Alina, who had returned from Boston in January. The women took over, shooing Kane out of the bedroom and getting to work. The labor lasted through the day and into the evening, long and difficult. Kane paced the front room, wearing a path in the floor. Tom and Miguel sat with him, offering support and sharing stories of when their own children were born. Finally, just as the sun was setting, a baby's cry pierced the air. Kane jumped to his feet, his heart pounding. Mrs. Adams appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Sullivan. You have a son. And your wife is doing well, tired but healthy." Kane rushed into the bedroom. Victoria lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, but her face was radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was their son. Kane approached slowly, almost reverently. "A boy," Victoria said softly. "Kane, look at him. He is perfect." The baby was small and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and his eyes squeezed shut. Kane reached out tentatively and touched one tiny hand. Immediately, the baby's fingers wrapped around his father's finger, gripping surprisingly tight. "He is strong," Kane said, his voice choked with emotion. "Hello, son. I am your father." "What should we name him?" Victoria asked. They had discussed names for months without settling on anything definite. But looking at his son, Kane suddenly knew. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Joseph Sullivan, after my father and my grandfather, Tom for short." "Thomas," Victoria repeated, trying it out. "Tom Sullivan, I like it." "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." Kane sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping one arm around Victoria and using his other hand to stroke his son's soft hair. "Thank you," he whispered to Victoria. "Thank you for this, for him, for everything." They sat like that, the three of them, as night fell and the ranch settled into quiet. Outside, the winter stars blazed across the New Mexico sky, bearing witness to the beginning of this new life. The first few months with baby Tom were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Victoria, who had never been around babies much, learned as she went. Carmen was an invaluable help, showing her how to nurse, how to soothe a fussy infant, how to tell the difference between various cries. Kane was a surprisingly hands-on father, getting up for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and talking to him. "He cannot understand you yet," Victoria said, amused, finding Kane in the nursery at 2 in the morning telling Tom about the ranch. "He will someday. I want him to know his heritage, where he comes from." Kane looked up, smiling. "Go back to bed, I have him." By late spring, Tom was smiling and cooing, responding to his parents' voices. Kane delighted in making his son laugh, doing silly things just to hear that infectious baby giggle. Victoria watched her husband and son together, her heart so full she thought it might burst. In June, Victoria received an unexpected letter from her mother. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a bomb. Victoria stared at it for a long time before finding the courage to open it. The letter was brief and stiff, written in her mother's formal hand. Her mother had heard through acquaintances that Victoria had married and had a child. She wrote that enough time had passed, and that perhaps a reconciliation might be considered. She asked, in carefully neutral language, if Victoria might send a photograph of her grandson. Victoria's first instinct was to throw the letter in the fire, as she had done with Gerald's letter. But something stopped her. She showed it to Kane that evening. "What do you want to do?" he asked, reading it carefully. "I do not know. Part of me wants to ignore it, to let them live with the consequences of disowning me. But another part, a smaller part, wonders if maybe enough time has passed." Victoria looked at Tom, sleeping peacefully in his cradle. They are his grandparents, even if they do not deserve to be. "It is your choice," Kane said. "I will support whatever you decide." After much thought, Victoria wrote back. Her response was polite but distant. She enclosed a photograph that a traveling photographer had taken of her and Kane and Tom. She wrote briefly about her life in Wilson, about her husband and the ranch, about her teaching. She did not apologize for her choices or ask for forgiveness, simply stated facts. The reply came 2 months later. Her mother's letter was warmer this time, asking more questions, sharing news about relatives. She mentioned that Victoria's father had been ill, that it had made him reconsider certain decisions. She hinted that they might like to visit, if that would be acceptable. Victoria discussed it with Kane at length. Finally, she decided to allow a visit, but on her terms and in her home. The letter she sent back made clear that she was happy in her life, proud of her choices, and that any relationship with her parents would require them to respect her and Kane. To her surprise, her parents agreed. They arrived in September, traveling by train and looking distinctly uncomfortable in the rough Western setting. Victoria met them with Tom on her hip and Kane at her side, projecting confidence she did not entirely feel. Her father looked older, his hair fully gray now. Her mother was still elegant but more subdued than Victoria remembered. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before her mother spoke. "Victoria, you look well." "I am well, better than I have ever been." Victoria shifted Tom. "This is my husband, Kane Sullivan. Kane, my parents, Richard and Margaret Vance." Kane shook hands with Victoria's father, his grip firm. "Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, welcome to our home." The visit was strained at first. Victoria's parents were clearly uncertain how to behave, how to bridge the gap of 2 years and so much hurt. But Tom, oblivious to the tension, was a perfect icebreaker. He smiled at his grandparents, reaching out chubby hands to grab at Margaret's necklace. Despite herself, Victoria's mother softened, taking Tom and cooing at him. Over the 3 days of the visit, some healing occurred. Victoria's parents saw her life, saw how happy she was, and slowly acknowledged that they had been wrong. Her father, in a stiff conversation on the porch, apologized for trying to force her into an unwanted marriage, for putting business ahead of his daughter's happiness. "I could have lost you forever," Richard said gruffly. "My illness made me realize what matters." "I am glad you found happiness, Victoria, even if it was not the life I envisioned for you. It was not a perfect reconciliation. Too much hurt existed for that. But it was a start, a tentative rebuilding of bridges long burned." When her parents left, Victoria felt lighter, some old weight lifted. She had not realized how much their rejection still pained her until the pain began to ease. "How do you feel?" Kane asked that night, holding her close in bed. "Good. Not completely healed, but better. They do not get to be part of our everyday lives, not yet and maybe not ever fully. But I am glad Tom will know his grandparents, even from a distance." Victoria nestled closer. "You are my real family, you and Tom and Alina and everyone here, but it helps to know that particular door is not completely closed." Life settled into a happy rhythm. Tom grew from baby to toddler, learning to walk and then run, chattering in that half-intelligible way of small children. He was a sunny child, friendly and curious and utterly adored by everyone on the ranch. The ranch hands took turns giving him pony rides, and Alina spoiled him shamelessly. In the spring of 1888, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. This time she knew the signs immediately. Kane was overjoyed, though worried. "The first birth was so hard on you," he said, protective as always. "Every birth is different," Victoria assured him. "I am stronger now. I know what to expect. Everything will be fine." She was right. In December, their daughter was born after a much shorter and easier labor. They named her Rose Margaret Sullivan, Rose for Kane's mother and Margaret for Victoria's. The baby girl had her mother's blonde hair and her father's green eyes, and a set of lungs that could wake the entire ranch. Tom, now almost 2, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Victoria often found him standing by Rose's cradle, singing nonsense songs or bringing her his favorite toys. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered under Kane's management. Victoria resumed teaching part-time once Rose was old enough, going into town 2 days a week. She established the lending library she had dreamed of, working with Alina to stock it with donated and purchased books. She and Kane added to their family another son, James, born in 1890, and twin girls, Emma and Sarah, born in 1893. Their home was exactly what Kane had envisioned that day on the overlook, full of noise and chaos and love. Children's laughter echoed through the rooms. Boots and toys cluttered the floors. The dinner table was crowded and loud with conversation. Tom grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch, following Kane everywhere, learning the business. Rose was fearless and stubborn, insisting she could do anything her brother could. James was gentle and bookish, preferring reading to ranch work. The twins were mirror images, finishing each other's sentences and communicating in that mysterious way twins have. Victoria's relationship with her parents remained cordial if distant. They visited once a year, and Victoria took the children to Philadelphia twice, showing them where she had grown up. But home was Wilson, was the ranch, was the life she and Kane had built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kane took Victoria back to the overlook. They had not been there in years, too busy with children and work. But he arranged for Alina to watch the kids and took Victoria riding just as he had when they were courting. The valley below looked the same, the patchwork of properties, Wilson in the distance, roads threading between ranches. But so much had changed too. New houses dotted the landscape. The town had grown, and they had grown from newlyweds to parents, from young people to adults settled in their lives. "You remember what I said here 10 years ago?" Kane asked, his arm around Victoria's waist. "You said you loved me, that you wanted to marry me and fill your house with children. And we did all that." Kane turned her to face him. "These have been the best 10 years of my life, Victoria. You have made me happier than I ever imagined being. Thank you for saying yes that day on the platform, for taking a chance on me." "I will always say yes to you," Victoria replied, kissing him. "You caught me when everyone else let go, and you have been holding on tight ever since." They stood on that hilltop, the same place where they had first declared their love, and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Below them, the valley was settling in for the evening. Somewhere in the ranch house, their 5 children were probably driving a leaner to distraction. Life was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. As the years continued to pass, Victoria reflected often on the strange turns her life had taken. If the platform had not collapsed that October day in 1885, if Kane had not been there to catch her fall, everything would have been different. She would have been a different person living a different life. Instead, she had found love and purpose in the most unexpected place. She had found a man who saw her for who she really was and loved her all the more for it. She had built a family and a life far richer than anything she could have planned. The children grew up strong and happy. Tom eventually took over the ranch when Kane was ready to step back. Rose, true to her nature, moved to Santa Fe and became a teacher like her mother, though she returned to Wilson every summer. James went to university and became a lawyer, returning to practice in New Mexico territory. The twins married ranchers from neighboring properties, staying close to home. Kane and Victoria grew old together, their hair graying, their faces weathering with age and sun and laughter. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and flourish. Through it all, their love remained constant, the foundation on which everything else was built. On a warm afternoon in the spring of 1920, Victoria sat on the porch of the ranch house with Kane beside her. They were both in their 60s now, bodies worn from years of hard work, but spirits still vibrant. Their children had thrown them a party the week before to celebrate their 34th wedding anniversary. 34 years, Victoria mused, watching their great-grandson, a child named after Kane, playing in the yard. Where did the time go? Into a life well lived, Kane replied, taking her hand. His grip was not as strong as it once was, but it was still steady. No regrets, Victoria. She looked at the man beside her, at his weathered face and kind eyes, at the home they had built and the family they had raised. She thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off a train in Wilson 35 years ago, who had literally and figuratively been falling when Kane caught her. Not a single one, Victoria said, squeezing his hand. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. You did the same for me. Kane leaned over and kissed her forehead. I would catch you again, you know, every single time. I know, Victoria said softly. I know. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, hands clasped, surrounded by the proof of their love. The ranch spread out before them, still thriving, still home. Their children and grandchildren would visit soon for Sunday dinner, filling the house with noise and laughter once more. Victoria thought about how one moment could change everything, how a single act of kindness could ripple out into a lifetime. Kane had offered his hand to a falling woman, and she had taken it. Together, they had built something lasting and beautiful. As evening approached and the New Mexico sky turned gold and pink, Victoria rested her head on Kane's shoulder, perfectly content. She had been caught when everyone else let go, and in catching her, Kane had found his own salvation. Two broken people, healing each other, building a life of love and joy from the wreckage of their pasts. It was, Victoria thought, the best story she could have ever lived. The years continued their inevitable march forward. Kane and Victoria watched the world change around them. New Mexico became a state in 1912, bringing pride and celebration to all who lived there. Automobiles appeared on the roads, replacing some of the wagons and horses, though the ranch still relied heavily on traditional methods. The world grew more modern, but the values they had instilled in their family remained constant. In 1925, Kane fell ill with pneumonia. At 68, his body could not fight off the infection as it might have in youth. Victoria nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave. Their children took turns visiting, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren to see him. On a quiet morning with Victoria holding his hand, Kane spoke softly. "I am not afraid, you know. I have lived a good life, a full life. You gave me that." "Do not talk like you are dying," Victoria said fiercely, though tears streamed down her face. "You are strong. You will get through this, Victoria." Kane squeezed her hand weakly. "If this is my time, I need you to know falling in love with you was the best thing I ever did. Every moment, every day with you was a gift. Promise me you will be all right." "I cannot promise that," Victoria whispered. "You are my heart, Kane. You caught me when I was falling, and I have been holding on to you ever since." Kane smiled, that same transforming smile that had captured her heart 40 years before. And what a beautiful fall it was, all the way into love. He recovered, though slowly, and Victoria thanked God for the reprieve. They had 5 more years together, years filled with the simple joys of long marriage, sitting together on the porch, watching their family grow, sharing memories of a lifetime spent side by side. When Kane finally passed in 1930, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Victoria was beside him as she had been for 44 years. She mourned deeply but not bitterly, knowing she had been blessed beyond measure. They had had decades together, had raised 5 children who were themselves raising families, had built something lasting and good. Victoria lived another 12 years, cared for lovingly by her children and surrounded by family. She continued to tell the story of how she and Kane met, how he had literally caught her when she was falling, how that single moment had changed both their lives forever. On a spring afternoon in 1942, Victoria passed away quietly, at the age of 84. She was buried next to Kane on a hillside overlooking the ranch, the same view they had loved from the overlook where he had first proposed. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that bore their names, the years of their lives, and a simple inscription Victoria had requested. He caught her when everyone else let go. Together they never fell again. Their children gathered at the graveside, along with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them products of that long-ago moment when Kane Sullivan offered his hand to a falling woman named Victoria Vance. The love that had started on a broken platform in Wilson, New Mexico territory, had spread and multiplied through generations. Tom Sullivan, now in his mid-50s and running the ranch with his own children, stood at his parents' grave after everyone else had left. He placed a hand on each headstone, remembering. "Thank you," he said softly to the 2 people who had given him life and shown him what love looked like. "For everything." The wind blew across the hillside, carrying the scent of spring grass and wildflowers. Below, the ranch spread out in the afternoon sun, still thriving, still home to the Sullivan family. The house Kane had built was full again with Tom's grandchildren, another generation filling it with noise and laughter and love. The story of Kane and Victoria became family legend, passed down through the years. Great-great-grandchildren who never met them still heard the tale of how their ancestors met, how a cowboy caught a falling woman, and how that simple act of heroism blossomed into a love story for the ages. And so the legacy lived on, proof that sometimes the worst moments in life, a broken platform, a fall into nothing, can become the best when the right person is there to catch you. Kane and Victoria's love had been tested and proven, had weathered 44 years of life's challenges, and had created something that would endure long after they were gone. Their story was one of second chances and new beginnings, of finding love in unexpected places, of building a life together one day at a time. It was a reminder that home is not always where you start, but where you end up. And that family is not just blood, but the people who choose to hold on when everyone else lets go. In the end, Kane and Victoria Sullivan left behind more than land or possessions. They left a legacy of love, a testament to the power of one person seeing another's worth and refusing to let them fall. They left children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their values forward. They left a story that would be told and retold, inspiring future generations to offer their own hands to those who were falling, to choose love over convention, to build lives of meaning and purpose. The ranch remained in the Sullivan family for generations to come, but more importantly, the love that Kane and Victoria had shared remained as well, embedded in the very foundation of everything they had built together. Every marriage in the family was measured against theirs, every partnership judged by the standard they had set. Years later, one of their great-great-granddaughters found herself at a crossroads, uncertain about accepting a marriage proposal from a man she loved but her family disapproved of. Her grandmother took her to the gravesite on the hillside and told her the story of Kane and Victoria, of how Victoria had walked away from everything to start over, of how Kane had caught her when she was falling. "Love like theirs does not come along often," the grandmother said. "But when it does, you have to be brave enough to reach for it, even if it means leaving everything else behind." Victoria did, and she never regretted it. Neither did Kane. The young woman accepted the proposal, and her own love story began. Another branch on the family tree that traced back to that October day in 1885 when a platform collapsed, and a cowboy offered his hand. And so the story came full circle, generation after generation, each one learning the same lesson that love requires courage, that family is chosen as much as given, and that sometimes the best things in life happen when we are brave enough to fall, trusting that the right person will catch us. Kane and Victoria Sullivan had lived their truth, had loved deeply and completely, and had left a legacy that time could not diminish. They had built a life together from almost nothing, had raised a family, had created a home. They had shown everyone around them what real love looked like: steady, constant, growing stronger with each passing year rather than fading. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had started with one. It was a story of daily choices, of choosing each other every single day for 44 years. It was about the small moments: breakfast conversations, evening walks, hands held across a table, quiet support during difficult times, shared joy during celebrations. It was about building something lasting in a world that constantly changed. It was about being each other's constant when everything else was uncertain. It was about the promise Kane made that first day, "I have got you," and how he kept that promise every day of their lives together. And it was about Victoria's truth, spoken on that platform and proven through decades: "You caught me when everyone else let go," and how Kane never let go, not once, not ever, until death parted them at last. Their love story became the foundation upon which generations built their own lives, a reminder that the best relationships are not found but forged, not perfect, but perfected through time and commitment and unwavering dedication. Kane and Victoria Sullivan had shown their family what it meant to truly love someone, to catch them when they fall, and to hold on through everything life brings. And in that small corner of New Mexico, on a ranch that still bore their name, their legacy lived on, a testament to the enduring power of love given freely, caught gratefully, and cherished completely.